What's going on, everybody? Have you guys ever wondered how you could make your life simpler at flight school or potentially give yourself an edge over the competition in getting that #1 honor graduate spot to select the aircraft of your choice? Well, tonight I'm going to give you some tips and tricks of the trade that might make your life a little easier in flight school. Before we get started, I want to disclose that I am not endorsed or sponsored by any of the companies that I'm going to talk about tonight. But hey, ForeFlight, Hangar, if you guys are listening, I would definitely love to sponsor any of your products. Just saying. All right, so let's go ahead and get right into it. The first thing we're going to talk about is ForeFlight. I'm sure if you've been involved in general aviation and or had a relative or friend that has been involved in general aviation and you're getting ready to go to flight school, I'm sure at some point you've heard of ForeFlight. ForeFlight is an amazing product that has hit the aviation world. And I think it's been around for about a decade. I could be wrong on that, but I think it's been around for a while. Their yearly subscription could be quite pricey. The subscription that I got is the Military One flight bag. That is the upper echelon of military flight bags, but you can get through flight school quite easily with just the basic military flight bag. I think that subscription runs for $240 or $250 a year. I could be wrong on that. Mine, it's way above that. I don't even want to tell you how much the Military One flight bag costs, but I think it's worth it. It looks cool anyway. It does some pretty cool stuff. But anyways, ForeFlight, even if you get the basic subscription, this can make a huge difference while you're going through flight school. You're definitely not going to need it right away. And in fact, I went through flight school all the way up to the end of advanced instruments before I even got my ForeFlight subscription. But it is a helpful tool, particularly in BWS, and I'm going to tell you why. So in BWS, you are going, this is, for those of you guys who don't know, BWS is at the very end of Common Core, which is your basic, the basic flight school curriculum before you go into advanced aircrafts. So BWS is where you learn all the tactical flying, route planning, just tactical stuff. So in BWS, basically you get a grid from your instructor pilot at the end of the day, and they're like, hey, this is your LZ for tomorrow. They may give you a few grids. And your homework assignment is basically to go home and plot a route, a tactical route that takes you all the way up to that grid in the time standard that you're supposed to do it in. So, that being said, ForeFlight makes your life a whole lot easier doing this. I had ForeFlight in BWS. Now, for those of you guys who do not have ForeFlight, you do everything off of AMPS, Falcon View, and Mission Explorer, which comes on the laptop that they actually issue you in flight school. The problem with only using AMPS is it's a very glitchy and buggy system, and AMPS has been around forever. It's not as user-friendly as ForeFlight. ForeFlight, it's like you put the grid in and you like literally drag your route by your finger on like, oh, that looks like a good spot over there. I'm going to put a ACP over there. I'm going to put my release point right here. It's very user-friendly. AMPS, it's not as user-friendly. You got to kind of play around with it to build the perfect route you want. ForeFlight allows you to have that aerial view, that satellite imagery, and then you just plug and play. So the way that I would do it is I'd get my LZ that I was supposed to land on, plot it, I'd go home, and I would backwards plan from that LZ all the way back to my starting point. And I'd put my release point at a, maybe an intersection that was easily identifiable. For instance, like an intersection with maybe a church or a certain looking house, or graveyards are a big one in flight school. Everybody knows that. A pond. I'd put my release points and my waypoints at all these locations. That way, whenever I was planning my route, I could see and identify something from the helicopter and be like, oh, I've seen that chicken house before. And I could go to my map and be like, yep, there's a chicken house. All right, that is ACP1. All right, let's go to ACP2. ACP2, it's a weird looking crescent moon looking pond. So we're following that. Boom, there's the pond that I'm looking for. Boom, next heading and distance. Let's go. So I do all of that on ForeFlight, and then I'd plug all of those grids for those ACPs into AMPS to get that time distance heading card, because you still need to use AMPS to get that time distance heading card, but you can do all of your route planning on ForeFlight. So my process would be everything on ForeFlight transferred over to AMPS, which would take around 20 minutes, and then I would draw it out on my paper map. And then if you want to be really high speed, not to brag, but I actually did this, you go into another app that I'm actually going to talk about and get updated satellite imagery and use the snippet tool to put those in your map book, so that when you're looking at your map book, you can have a little picture above your ACP to even help you out. You do that, you will not get lost, I guarantee you. So, ForeFlight definitely makes your life easier in flight school. I wouldn't get it for P1 or P2. Basic instruments, if I could go back and do it all over again, maybe I would. But definitely BWS, it's not a bad time to get ForeFlight. So moving on from ForeFlight, the next thing I'm going to talk about is Flight Plan Go. If you're a little bit more on the frugal side and you want to save your money, which I don't blame you, Flight Plan Go is a free app. You're going to get all your DoD flip approach plates, and I went through basic instruments and advanced instruments just using Flight Plan Go. And would ForeFlight have made my life a little bit easier? Yeah, because it comes with the interactive map and everything. But if you have your approach plates and you have your paper sectional, you can do some pretty good route planning with just those items. Flight Plan Go, like I said, it's completely free, and it's pretty user-friendly as well. So that's a good app to download. Now, going back to the previous conversation of ForeFlight, I want to mention Zoom.Earth. This is the next one I'm going to talk about. Zoom.Earth is a website that you can Google, and it's very similar to Google Earth. The only difference is it gives you live, up-to-date satellite imagery of the area that you might be operating in. And it's completely for free. So remember what I was saying about I would do all of my route planning off of ForeFlight, transfer it into AMPS, get my time distance heading card, and the last step would be I would plug Zoom.Earth into my laptop and I would punch those grids. You can literally put grids into Zoom.Earth and it will take you to that grid. Now the picture on ForeFlight, like let's take a pond for example, because ponds, if they're unique, like they have a weird shape to them, those make pretty good waypoints. So that weird looking pond that you may have picked for a waypoint, you may punch that grid into Zoom.Earth and maybe it has less water in it than the picture that you had from ForeFlight, or maybe it has more water in it and the shape kind of changed just a little bit. Zoom.Earth is going to give you that very accurate looking picture of what you can expect to see when you're flying over it at 500 feet AGL. So I would take the time, go to Zoom.Earth in my laptop, and I would use the snippet tool to get the most up-to-date pictures. I would then print that out, little small, about that size. I'd put it into my map book that you make, the Aussie Fold map book, and I I would tape it onto my map book, and then I would draw an arrow pointing at the ACP. That way, when I would flip it open, I'd be like, oh, look, there's my pond. All right, next heading is 270. And you turn, and then you look at your next picture for your ACP. So that is a cheat code for getting the best results in BWS. So moving on to the next thing. This isn't very important for the advanced airframe portion of flight school. It may be for some of the airframes. I know it's not for the Black Hawk, but it is important for the 72. That is a finger light. So having a finger light for me made my life a little more comfortable whenever I was going through nights in BWS in the Lakota. So now I fly a Black Hawk, and in the Black Hawk, right above our head, we have a detachable supplemental lighting source, and it's on a wire. And typically, if I'm flying nights for a long period of time, right when I get in the aircraft, I will detach that light, and I will wrap it around my ALSI vest. That way, if I need to look at something on my knee board, I just pull that light out and I hit the back of it, and it gives me a nice kind of dim light that I can see what I'm looking at, but not so bright that it's going to white out my freaking night vision. You know what I mean? So that's in the Black Hawk. Now in the 72, you don't have the luxury of having that nice detachable supplemental light. So a finger light definitely comes in handy. So if you want to look at your checklist, you want to look at something on your knee board, they make these finger lights that you can put on your finger. I would always face mine on the inside, and I would just put a little pressure on it. It's a nice little green light that you can look at whatever you're looking for. And I'd always keep it on this hand as well. Obviously your cyclic is on your right hand. So that helped me out. Now, you don't have to have this. I think my stick buddy used some little keychain light, and it worked great for him. But you want to splurge a little bit, get you a finger light, get you a finger light. I do know that they overcharge for these things at the hangar. They probably get these things from China by the bulk for like 1 cent a unit. I'm just making that up. I don't know that for a fact. But they're pretty cheap looking. I can't imagine them paying a whole lot, and then they charge at the hangar a pretty decent amount of money. I think mine was like $35, so a little steep on the price for a little plastic LED light, but it definitely makes your life a little easier when you're going through nights and BWS. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the counterweight bag. You gotta have you a counterweight bag. So this little thing is a Velcro bag, and it goes on the back of your helmet. This is for flying with goggles. Obviously, when you put goggles on your flight helmet, it's going to add some weight to the front of the helmet. You put a counterweight on the back of it, and it evens it out. So it's almost kind of like there's nothing pushing down on the front of your head, creating what they call a hot spot. I have flown without a counterweight for several hours before NG, and I always get a headache every single time, and it's from those NVGs causing that pressure in the front of your head, and it's not a very pleasant feeling. I do like a counterweight. They sell blocks and they sell bags. I prefer the bags because what I do is I take a Ziploc bag and I put pennies in the Ziploc bag. And I can make my counterweight lighter, or I can make it heavier if I choose. And I put that Ziploc bag full of pennies in that counterweight bag, and I put it on the back of my helmet. If you get the block, that block is set to whatever weight that they sold you. I also know in flight school, I think whenever I was going through, they didn't let people fly with the block for whatever reason. I know at my unit, they don't care. They'll let you fly with the block. But the counterweight bag is what I still have, and that's what I used in flight school, and you can get that at the hangar as well. So, to summarize what we have talked about, you got ForeFlight, Flight Plan Go, Zoom.Earth, finger lights, and you also have the counterweight bag. So those are some items that if you're kind of aware of right off the bat, and you go ahead and get those things, you are going to have an easier life in flight school. The main one is, I think, ForeFlight and BWS. Like I said, if you're tight on money, don't even worry about it. You can completely make it through flight school without having ForeFlight. But I did appreciate it. I know that if I didn't have ForeFlight, it'd probably take me like a good 3 hours to create a quality route for BWS, and having that ForeFlight, I'd probably spend an hour to an hour and a half doing my route planning every night just because I did it very thoroughly. And you don't want to get lost. That's an important part of BWS, is being able to use pilotage and dead reckoning to get to your point in plus or minus 30 seconds. So, yeah. Anyways, if you guys have any comments, any questions, drop them below. Also, if you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe, guys, if you like my content. I really appreciate all the support. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.